All right, history of FASA. um, I don't really have anything prepared. I'm hoping that everybody who's listening has read the beginning history and newsletters that Andy has been putting out for us, and basically wanted to see what you guys were interested in hearing about. So ask a question. What part of our 40-year history do you want details about? How did we manage to start with a budget of only $350? As with any company that starts with a gaming product, or a product that evolved out of the games that we were playing, you know, coming out of the Merchant Marine Academy, Jordan and I both had taken drafting classes. We had drafting equipment, and so we drew the deck plans. That was cheap. 350 buys you a couple hundred copies each of our deck plans at Sir Speedy at a quick print shop. And that's how you start. You keep going because you don't pay yourself for the first 3 years while living at home. And I don't think we started paying ourselves until Jordan needed a car. So we had to start making payments to make payments, and that's when we started taking draws from the company. And Andy says, and that's exactly what we're doing now. FASA Games exists because some would ascribe it to my horror talents, but everybody you've been listening to all weekend long has been working for shares in the company in the hopes that someday it will pay off big. That plus all expenses paid to Gen Con each year, assuming there's a Gen Con. But in the early days, yeah, every penny went back into the company to print more deck plans, to pay authors that we were able to convince to write and to finish a product for us. After doing easy products, the deck plans, guys at Game Designers Workshop wanted more, thought we could do more than just that, and plus we wanted to make more interesting products. So that's what was the root of the first Traveler Adventures. And I don't remember how we got in touch with the Keith brothers, Bill and Andy, but that began our long relationship with Marischal Adventures and Bill Keith and Andy Keith. They did Traveler Adventures for us. They wrote all kinds of things. Bill Keith eventually started writing Battletech novels and has since gone on to a career as a novelist. A lot of our writers that we published first novels for have gone on to further writing careers. Mike Stackpole, slews of Battletech and Shadowrun writers have gone on to making writing their careers with starts from us. waiting for everybody who's typing to reveal the next question or query. FASA started out of homes. I think about a year or so in, we figured that this might actually be a real business, and found a old warehouse on Cermak and Halstead in Chicago. We shared the space with Mayfair Games, the beginning of Mayfair Games. That's how each of us were able to afford it. After a couple of years there, we wanted to have our own space, so we moved to our Van Buren location. And then once VWE happened, VWE found the space on Cermak, and FASA eventually moved there also. The one thing that all three of these locations have is that they were within walking distance of where I happen to live. So that's how that went. The other interesting story, of course, is that as soon as FASA moved into the Cermak Road location, I think within a couple of weeks of moving in, so everything is brand spanking new, fitted out, all the equipment is in place. There was a fire in one of the elevator shafts, and FASA's offices were on the 5th floor of the building, and it got flooded. And we sent out a great thanks to the fire department, who managed to get our photo setting machine off the floor so that it wasn't ruined. This was a $20,000 or $30,000 machine to set pages for us. So all of that happened within a couple of weeks of finishing the move, and turned Sam Lewis's hair gray, another couple shades of gray on that evening. What was it like to pivot from pre-internet to what we have now? Because of our ongoing work with virtual world entertainment and computer games, computer systems, and the kind of reaction we were getting to our licensed computer games, we could see that the old way of doing things, the way we did things throughout most of the 80s, was probably not going to survive. Console games, phones were just were still science fiction at that point, the phones we have today. It was a challenge. One of the things we did as soon as we could afford it and could make the time for it was to get an online store so that people could order from us directly. Even back then, there was always the problem of trying to get our product to distributors who would then get it to brick and mortar locations. But that was starting to break down. We want to blame it on magic cards and distributors just always chasing after the easy money. But it was always a challenge and there was always the discussions about should we sell directly to stores and bypass distributors or not. And by the time we shut down operations, one of the reasons we did that was because when you look at the year's performances, and this was true for several years, the publishing end of things was just breaking even, and all the profit came from our licensing revenue. And as Jordan was getting started in WizKids and had moved to Seattle as a result of the Microsoft deal in '98, and Mort wanted to follow along with him, be close to family in Seattle, we made the decision to suspend operations and go on from there. So we missed all of the explosion in social media stuff that happened after that. FASA Games started in 2012. We're dealing virtually everything is direct to the customer. There is almost no distributor sales. Finding a game shop with our product in it requires the owner of that game shop to know us and to want our product in there, and he'll find a way to get it. But there is no distribution of our product like there was 20, 30 years ago. Andy asks who is the favorite person to work with and who would we work with again one day. I assume you mean our freelancers and not folks within the company. The one very cool thing that we were able to do was when we decided, at a certain point we said, okay, every couple of years we have to come up with a new game line. Based on the strength of Battlerun, our Battletech, we called together our favorite writers, authors, people who expressed interest in working with us, and we would take a weekend, usually at the end of the summer, August, September, fly the authors in, put them up, and we would just spend the whole weekend brainstorming about what we wanted the next game to be like. And that happened for both Shadowrun and Earthdawn. And those were great sessions where we'd figure out, okay, we knew more or less the theme of the game we wanted. For Shadowrun, we wanted to do a cyberpunk game, but we wanted to make our game different from everybody else's in the marketplace. And how can we do that? Discuss the ways to do it. Jordan was always excellent at creating an image, creating the cover piece that would get across what the game was all about. And with that and all of the ideas of the games that were in the marketplace at the time and the kind of games we would love to play, that's the genesis, that's the kernel of the game. And for Shadowrun, it was the images you see on the cover, plus the fact that we wanted Magic users to be able to use machine guns. Not like D&D where a Magic user can't use a sword. So those groups, those were great times, and we managed to pick great teams of writers to do each of those games. Also, every year we would do the same thing for Battletech. We would bring our most prolific writers, Mike Stackpole, a few others, again for a long weekend to talk about the direction we wanted the game to take. As we've written in the last newsletter, FASA Corporation Games, it's not a static universe, it's an evolving universe. There's a big story that we want to tell. But in order to tell it right, we've got to figure out what that story is going to be and all the ramifications of the smallest of events. So again, there would be brainstorming weekends where we would plot out the Fourth Succession War, where we would plot out the invasion of the clans, where we'd plot out, okay, the clans are here, how do we resolve that story? And more importantly, when we decided to close active operations, how do we bring the Battletech story not to an end, but to a nice conclusion of all the active threads that we had going at the time. And all that was done through our novels. Don't know if I exactly answered Andy's question, but again, there's no question that Jordan and I worked very, very well together. And FASA wouldn't exist without either one of us. Would the artists have input into these setting development sessions? Yes and no. Before these sessions, we would have a concept of the game that we wanted to do, and Jordan would work with the staff artists to work on ideas, work on development. In Battletech, it was the Dwayne Luces and the David Dietrichs who would work on how things would look and feel. Sometimes you get artists who click and whose work really becomes representative of the line. That's what happened with Jeff Lavenstein and Earth Dawn. Again, at this point, we would have several dozen freelance artists who would work for us, who contributed, and we would pick and choose the artists whose styles work best with the subject matter of the game. And again, you always try and give, whether it's a writer or an artist, as much free rein as you can so that their ideas, if they're good ones, can get wrapped in and get incorporated. One of our favorite operating theories was whenever we come up with something, we would always, whenever anybody came up with something that was a cool idea, we would then backtrack and try and figure out how to justify it within the setting. Same for an artist. If they came up with a cool drawing, cool idea, well, now we have to figure out why it works in the setting. And of course, bugs and other things that didn't quite make sense became features rather than errors or mistakes. Again, Jordan was always very good at coming up with the visual look and feel of a game line, of the idea for a game line. And first it would be our staff artists that would work on the development. Then we'd go out and try and figure out, who could paint the cover for us. And all of these little pieces come together, after a year of development for a new game. And it would generally take, 18 to 12 months from start to release to get a new game line launched. So we have BattleTech. A couple years later, 3 years later, we have Shadowrun. Don't remember at the moment which came first, Earth Dawn or Renegade Legion. Renegade Legion was the game systems that we would have done if we had gotten a Star Trek or Star Wars license, rather. Something we were actively pursuing and almost got, but that didn't work out, and Renegade Legion was the result. And the life of a game line just depended on how many copies were sold and how much staff it took to support the line in terms of editing, artists, layout, all of that sort of thing. Eventually it was decided that Renegade Legion wasn't pulling its weight, and we stopped supporting it and tried several times to license it out. And it just unfortunately comes down to dollars and cents at a certain point. Kyle asks, has the way the business interacts with gaming conventions changed drastically over the years? I don't think so. Conventions are a way for the staff to meet our customers face to face, meet a large number of customers face to face, get direct feedback about what they like and what they don't like. That's still true today. Conventions are a great place where you meet all of the talent in our industry, whether it's other friends and colleagues that are part of other companies, budding freelancers who are eager to show you their portfolios and their work in hopes of getting business, getting work. You get to see what everybody else is doing all in one place, which ideas work, which don't. Gen Con has always been a big convention. It's now a giant convention. Remember, we also use conventions to stage keystone events in the storylines of our products. BattleTech especially had major events that we pulled off to promote the game and to promote new products that we would release at conventions. I guess that's the other big thing that Gen Con and Origins were always known for. Everybody would gear their major product releases for those shows. One, to create buzz, and two, to get that initial slug of sales. Conventions are also usually attended by the leaders of gaming groups, and they would bring back what they saw at conventions back home and introduce it to all of their players. So it's the primary way to help spread the word. Gen Con is so big now that it's awfully difficult to make a splash. It's too easy to get lost in the crowd, and you really have to have a great product. You have to use social media, use all the other tools at your disposal to get the word out, to make your product known. It's always a challenge, and these days, for a smaller company like we currently are, it makes it even more difficult to be heard above the din of a convention, especially a big one like Gen Con. But the other way conventions have changed for us, I know that the first time we went to Gen Con, this would have been probably summer of 1980, summer of 1981. I think Jordan, I, and Bill Edelson, a friend of Jordan's who talked his way into a summer internship. I think we went up in my family's van. We slept in the van. We showered in a friend's hotel room, and attended the show. This was at University of Wisconsin Parkside, way back when. These days, it's the hotel room lottery to see how close we can, if we can walk to the convention or whether we have to commute. What is the origin story for 1879? In the settling of FASA and its assets in 2001, WizKids got the intellectual property rights to Battletech, Shadowrun, Earth Dawn, Renegade Legion. They discovered Earth Dawn was more trouble than it was worth. People kept pestering about licenses and that sort of thing. They didn't want to deal with it, so they gave it back to me. The other asset that FASA had at that time was Ralpartha Europe, or Ralpartha, with facilities in Cincinnati and Liverpool in England. They desperately WizKids wanted the Cincinnati assets to do all the sculpting for HeroClix or Click System games. But they didn't need a manufacturing facility in England, so that remained with FASA Corporation. It also gave me an excuse to travel to England several times a year, which was always fun. 2010, 2011, 2012, we decide in various conversations with James Sutton at Red Brick to reactivate the FASA brand. Part of that is trying to figure out games that Ralpartha Europe can create miniatures for. And 1879 came out of those kinds of conversations. Here's a cool period of history. Here's a way to add the science fiction fantasy element. And here's a game that we can create a new tabletop miniatures game with to have tabletop battles. So ideas from Martin Tetlow and Paul Reed in the UK, James Sutton and myself, that was the kernel for 1879. And ultimately, Andrew Ragland was brought in as the developer for the line, and he ran with the theme and bringing it to the point where Brad is taking over management of the story and the product line, and that's where we are. Again, all kinds of ideas and products that we want to put out. It's just a matter of finding the time to get it done. I suppose since we've alluded to it at our opening ceremony, again, FASA Corporation has said periodically every 2, 3, 4 years, whatever the decision is, that it's time for a new game line. And that might be what the secret product or project that was alluded to at the opening ceremony. That's might be something like that happening right now. But if such a thing was happening, I couldn't talk about it. Kickstarter. Kickstarter is a phenomena that allows companies like us to stay in business. As I talked about before, the manufacturer to distribution to retailer to customer supply chain has broken down for companies like us. Right now, we basically sell 95% of our product directly to the customer. Kickstarter is a fantastic tool for us to accomplish that. Kickstarter allows us to basically pre-sell product to our most fanatical backers, most fanatical customers. And it's a way to, within the Kickstarter community, spread the word about our products and product lines. It's much easier because Kickstarter is such a well-known and people know about it and trust it and aren't afraid to put up money up front for the promise of product down the road. That it allows us to carry on. In the good old days, we would announce a product to distributors. They would place orders for the product that we would ship as soon as it all came back from the printer. Those orders would account for 50%, 60% of our product run. And in cases of a major game, especially where we were printing 5,000 copies, 10,000 copies of something, we would move half that out the door on day one. That doesn't exist right now, but Kickstarter has taken its place. Plus, we get 100% of the dollars instead of having to pay the distributor's discount. So, if Kickstarter didn't exist, I don't know how we would. We'd have to. I know how we would have to work much, much harder in getting the word out that we have new stuff coming out. And as we all well know, since it took us 5 years to fulfill our first Earth Dawn campaign, it caused us to take a harsh look at ourselves and impose very stringent rules on when a product within the company was far enough along to qualify to be kickstarted. We had to know that we would finish it in a reasonable time so that we could get to the product to our backers in a reasonable time. And that's the goal. We have to keep our backers happy, keep our customers happy, and get stuff delivered in a timely fashion. Our current problem is with printers and once the books have been finished and delivered to the printers, actually getting the books completed and printed and delivered to our fulfillment center in Tennessee. COVID certainly hasn't helped, but it is not an excuse for the amount of time as it has taken our latest products to go from delivery to the printers to shipping to our customers. And this will cause us to look for other vendors, look for people who can deliver in a timely fashion. One other side note about the origins of 1879. we actually ran a Kickstarter for a combination miniatures game product and software version of the game, where you could link up with players wherever and play a version of the Universal 18 rules on your computer, phone, laptop, whatever. Unfortunately, that wasn't funded, and even though we had a pretty cool proof of concept, guys walking around on the battlefield, complete 3D terrain, unfortunately, it wasn't funded at the time. Probably a project before its time. Yes, meanwhile, we have, as always, third parties are always interested in exploiting our intellectual properties. They do that by, negotiating with a license from us to create products that we have neither the expertise, money, or time for. And we have licenses out there for Earth Dawn, for German language products. We actually have an 1879 license from a company in Brazil. And there are others that are in progress and in negotiation, and hopefully they will see the light of day sometime soon. While we can't legally get away with putting something like Pokemon in our product, we always want to look at things that are wildly successful in the marketplace, in Kickstarter, wherever, and of course see what's successful, see what people want, and try and see if we can figure out how to copy or use those ideas in our own special way to make a more appealing product. Is it possible for Earth Dawn to be as popular as Dungeons and Dragons? Yeah, probably not. But we have to figure out ways to broaden our base, our fan base. We're currently a niche publisher. We would like to break out and to become more mainstream, but we want to do that in ways that don't sacrifice what makes our games unique and compelling at the moment. Any other questions or comments? There's half a dozen of you outside the company that are listening. Anything in particular you'd like to hear? And we can trust Andy and Kyle to come up with something here. What aspect do I miss most from the Chicago office life? As most of you may know now, FASA Games is a distributed company. The official registered address is here in Oregon, outside of Portland, but we have people living in the Chicago area, in New England, in the Midwest. We have people that we deal with on on a daily basis in Australia, England, Canada. What you miss most about the office life is it's an office where everybody is. And if you need an answer to something, it's a walk down the hall, poke your head in the door, ask a question, get an answer, and it's done. Here, we're stuck with email and instant messaging and all of those things to try and get an answer. It's much more difficult to collaborate. And it added to the fact that everybody is working a full-time job and doing FASA games as a sideline. Makes getting things out in a challenge. It makes getting out a challenge. In the good old days, I mentioned yesterday, we would have gatherings, we would have playtest sessions, we would have late night sessions for whatever was needed. If a product needed to get out to the printer the next day because of a deadline for a convention, people would be in the office till all hours getting it done. We're able to have special games, as I mentioned yesterday. I hosted a Wild West game and a Circus Imperium game annually for everybody in the company that was interested. That community is probably what's missed most. As I mentioned earlier, all of FASA's locations were within walking distance from my house. Now, of course, I just come down to my basement office, so can't complain about the commute. But that's what's probably missed most. What was the best partnership, in my opinion, from the old days? What partnership are you asking about? FASA Corporation was very fortunate in that we were the first company to do many things, and that involved working with freelancers, working with licensors, not being afraid to ask what people thought was a ridiculous question. With our traveler license, that was simply a matter of sending our deck plans down to GDW and saying, are these good enough? They said yes and offered us a license. With a license, you have built-in product recognition. The reason we got the Star Trek license, the Doctor Who license, any of those, is simply we were the first to ask. All of the big media companies, Paramount for Star Trek, BBC for Doctor Who, and so on and so forth, they weren't really partners, so to speak. They just they allowed us to use their baby. Cool things about it is, visiting Paramount, the studio, going through the Star Trek archive and picking out slides that we wanted copies of to use as art and photographs in our product. That was pretty cool. But it's a big company, and they, demand that royalties be paid on time and accounted for properly and that sort of thing. So, again, money becomes the bottom line for them, and when you aren't generating enough income to make it worth their while, they'll find somebody better. And after a while, paying that royalty, 5%, 10% of every dollar that you bring in, that sucks. And that's what led to the development of our own titles, that we in turn got to license to others. The most lucrative license by far was with Activision. It took them an inordinate amount of time to get the product done right, but when they finally did, MechWarrior 2, that was extremely lucrative for us and allowed us to form FASA Interactive. And once Microsoft became really interested, that was what got sold to Microsoft, along with the electronic rights to some of our intellectual properties. So, in looking back, the best partnership in terms of what it did most for the company, that would have to say was probably with Activision. And that's where we were acting as licensor and they were the licensee. And I guess talking licensor licensees, the other licensee that we have to mention is Red Brick. Red Brick picked up the Earth Dawn license after Living Room Games and kept it alive and did a great job through the 2000s to the point where I was talked into bringing the FASA label back on the strength of their work, and that's gotten us to where we are today. With so many products under our belt, what kind of game am I most interested in making and playing these days? As has been noted elsewhere, I got into the adventure game industry through war games, old SPI games and Avalon Hill games. And all of us of a certain age, certain era, like to play with army men, with toy soldiers. I don't know, this is probably really dating myself, but in the good old days, a miniatures game consisted of building a couple of buildings and walls with Lincoln logs, putting your army men in it, and then throwing single bricks at them to try and knock them out. So I always liked miniatures games, and that's what led to my involvement with Ralpartha Europe, the evolution of 1879 as a miniatures game, our acquisition of the Demon World figure line from a company in Germany, and our we had the most fun playtesting and creating those kinds of games. Crimson Skies is an example. It was created because Jordan and Dave McCoy developed a look and feel for a game that they really wanted to do. Then Jordan and I sat down and hashed out the rules, and we had a great time working at our offices at FASA Interactive, creating this, which is essentially a board game. That's how Battletech started. That's how Renegade Legion started. tabletop games where if we didn't have the miniatures to start out with, we certainly had them at some point in the life cycle of the product. So if I was to be creating a game right now, it would probably involve miniatures. It's plus with a miniatures game, usually you only have to find one person to play with. With role-playing games, you have to find a group of people, and finding a group is always more difficult than finding just one. It was a sad day when in Seattle, or back in Chicago, a friend of mine from Merchant Marine Academy who lived in the suburbs moved to Florida because he and I would get together and play fighting sail on his blue living room carpet and that sort of thing. Less than 10 minutes left. Any final questions or comments? What am I most looking forward to for FASA as it is right now? I want FASA to continue to grow. I want its products to be successful so that I can reward the FASA team for all the hard work that they do every day. Hopefully things that we're working on right now, which will be revealed in good time, will go a long ways towards that. Everybody that's involved with FASA games right now is doing it for the love of it, but it would be great if it could be financially rewarding also. And in order to make that happen, we have to continue to develop great product in a timely fashion. Last year, Earth Dawn was, did great. We were able to release a succession of product, all related to one another, that expanded the story of Earth Dawn and moved it along. We want to be able to do that with all of our game lines. We want game lines that aren't getting much attention right now to get a bit more attention, to become more viable. Demon World, 1879 especially. We'll try and pump some blood into Noble Armada, but the secret project that I won't tell you about is exciting, and we're looking forward to being able to tell you about it all in good time. But no product released before its time, so we have to make sure we're getting everything right before we spill the beans. So, as Andy's just said, sign up for the newsletter, pay attention to us on Discord and other social media, and we'll let you know as soon as it's ready. And more importantly, we're speaking to the choir here for the half dozen of you that are listening. Spread the word, tell your friends, tell them what they missed, taunt them with things that you know that they don't, and go from there, and thank you.